Welcome back. In my last video, I talked a bit about how the nature of Heian Japanese aristocratic society gave rise to the use of waka as a major component in romantic and sexual relations between men and women. Today, I'm going to take a first step upon that path by looking at some poems on the early stages of love as conceived in Heian Japan. While love was obviously a powerful emotion and motivator, culturally, it was rarely thought of as a source of joy. Instead, the emphasis in much waka love poetry is on how the emotion is a source of suffering, and this is particularly clear in poems on the topic of hidden love. That is, poems composed when you were in love with someone but hadn't yet been able to tell her. These poems were almost always written by men. Here are 3 poems of this type, created for the poetry contest in 600 rounds. Koishisa o ika ni shite ka wa nagusamemu, wara yori hoka ni shiru hito wa nashi. My longing, is there any way to soothe it? For other than me, there is not one person knows it. Tsunei's poem is criticised by his opponents as being mundane, which the judge Shunzei rejects, although he still awards victory to the other poem in the round because it has more elegant imagery. Nevertheless, I feel that Tsunei captures the internal torment of a secret love well here. Ukimi tote sanomi wa ika ga tsutsumu beki, iwa de kuyashiki koto mo koso are. How pitiful am I! How can I simply conceal my feelings and say nothing, but painful events might unfold? Kenshaw focuses on the way in which fear of rejection can inhibit a would-be lover from taking the first step. Shunzei awards him a rare victory for this composition, because regretting what may happen is slightly more refined as a conception. Shinobitsutsu kono yo tsukinaba omou koto, koke no shita ni ya tomo ni kuchi nam. Continually concealing, should this world end, then my love for you beneath the moss, with me, would rot away. This poem wins its round because the image of beneath the moss is more in keeping with the idea of something hidden, which was a key component of the censored poems on this type of topic. Obviously, though, Heian gentlemen didn't spend all their time bottling up their emotions and not even daring to address the women whom they loved. Sooner or later, they had to man up and approach a woman and see how she would respond. I'm putting it that way because it was almost always the man who made the first move, although in certain circumstances it might not be unheard of for a lady to address a man first. A literary example of this occurs in the Tale of Genji, when the lady Yugao sends a poem out to Genji on the pretext of giving him a fan, when she sees his carriage waiting in the street outside her house. This isn't exactly her making the first move, though, because she thinks Genji might be Tono Chujo, with whom she has had a relationship before. In any case, if you remember, I said in the last video that relations between aristocratic men and women were highly constrained, and that opportunities for them to meet face to face were practically non-existent outside of the imperial palace and court. That was certainly true, but you may be asking yourself, did men really make romantic approaches to women based entirely on rumour and reputation? Did they really hear that the daughter of so-and-so was of age and cultured and just fire off a poem as a way of approaching her? Well, the answer to that is partly yes and partly no. A man would almost certainly initially judge whether a woman was worth approaching based upon her family, her background, and general reputation. Gossip was a favoured occupation of the aristocracy, and perhaps more importantly in this context, their servants. You have to remember that no one of noble status was ever truly alone. There would always be servants within call or in their presence. These individuals were much freer to move around and interact with each other than their masters and mistresses, and they would talk to each other, of course. So, one thing an aristocratic man would do on hearing about a lady would be to direct his servants to do a little low-key snooping. What was the lady like? What kind of women served her? Were they cultured and well-behaved? If the reports were positive, then that would increase the lady's attractiveness. Equally, on hearing that a man's servants were making discreet inquiries, a lady's serving women might make their own. Who might be interested in their mistress? Was he from a good family? Was he presentable? Did he have any other wives or ongoing relations with women? How had he treated former lovers? If the answers on both sides were positive, then the relationship might move on to the next stage, which could be the exchange of poems or something else. And that might be the man attempting to catch a glimpse of the lady, and, in some cases, the woman arranging things so that she might be seen accidentally by the man. One of the most important activities that men engaged in was known as kaimami, which literally means looking through a gap in the fence. The fence here could be a literal fence, but more often this was the barriers of curtains, screens and conventions that shielded well-born women from the gaze of unfamiliar men. Men constantly sought for opportunities to penetrate these barriers and catch sight of a woman in an unguarded moment. If this makes Heian noblemen all sound like inveterate peeping toms, well, perhaps they were in one sense. But, and this is important to remember too, while there's no doubt that women often found being spied on or seen by unfamiliar men unwelcome and annoying, Sei Shonagon mentions this in her pillow book, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes these glimpses would be arranged, and sometimes the woman would be very aware that she was being observed and would behave accordingly, often in literature at least, by reciting a poem which reveals her true feelings and thus makes her more attractive. Such glimpses would almost always have been fleeting, but might have been enough to get a sense of a woman's face, the condition of her hair, the appearance of her clothing and so forth, all of which would be enough to encourage a man to pursue her or possibly discourage him. The ultimate aim for a man, though, was to be able to observe a woman at length in good light, something in short supply in the typical Heian dwelling, and this was where peering through a literal fence came in, because this might allow a man to see a woman who had come forward to the veranda of her house to enjoy the sight of her garden. There are enough accounts of this activity in Heian literature for us to be reasonably certain that it was something that men did, with perhaps the most famous literary example of kaimami and its impact coming from the beginning of Ise Monogatari, the Tales of Ise. Ise Monogatari is an early example of what's known as an uta monogatari, a poem tale, a literary genre where poems were set in prose contexts to give readers an idea of the situation which might have given rise to such a poem, both as examples of the correct way to respond to such situations and to provide explanations for poems which were otherwise obscure. Many of the poems used for Ise Monogatari were written by a nobleman called Ariwara no Narihira, who lived at the end of the 9th century, and so there's been a tendency to see the work as a fictionalised biography of his life, and that's been a major contributor to Narihira's enduring reputation as one of the great romantic lovers of the early Heian period. In any case, at the very beginning of the tale, the protagonist, who is known simply as the man of old, is a young man, just into his majority, who goes hunting in Kasuga near the old capital of Nara. He comes across a house wherein live two beautiful sisters, whom he observes through a crack in the fence around their garden. Overcome by his emotions at the sight of them, he tears the sleeve from his hunting robe, which is decorated with a pattern of ferns, shinobu, writes a poem upon it, and sends it in to them. The poem is Kusagano no Waka murasaki no surigoromo shinobu no midare kagiri shirarezu. On Kasuga plain, young Cromwells of my dyed robes, confusion of ferns, and my feelings' extent are completely unaware. The Cromwell plant, murasaki, was commonly used as a metaphor for a young girl, while shinobu was homophonous with words for secret, and in this case, secret feelings, and recollection. The poem is a powerful statement of a young man's sexual and romantic awakening, triggered by the sight of the sisters he has secretly observed, feelings which he has no choice but to reveal to them. It was thus part of the courtly game of love that men were expected to tell women that something had triggered a sudden, uncontrollable burst of emotion. This could be having been able to observe a lady through kaimami, or it could be that he had caught sight of her in another way. I said in the last video that aristocratic women rarely went out. This is true, but it wasn't the case that they never did, although they had to take care to avoid being observed when they were out and about. If a lady went out on foot, which was quite unusual, she would wear a broad-brimmed hat with a full-body veil descending from it, so she was covered from head to toe. More normally, though, she would travel by ox cart, or gisha. There were various types of these, and what you'd have access to depended upon your wealth and status, but generally these would have solid walls and a roof, with blinds at either end to conceal the occupants from view, as the cart rumbled slowly through the streets of the capital. Here's a picture of one, to give you an idea of what that would have looked like. As I hope you can see, carts often had shutters or curtained windows in their side walls, which the occupants could open if they wanted to see out. Both men and women used ox carts for transport, and from outside no one would know who was riding in one unless they recognised the accompanying outriders, grooms and drivers. But if a woman didn't want complete privacy, there were ways in which she could announce her presence. Most obviously, women would sometimes let the sleeves of their robes protrude from beneath the blinds of the cart. This would reveal that it was a lady travelling inside, excite male interest, and show off her fashion sense, cultivation and breeding. She could also open the window shutters or draw the curtains. While the inside of the cart would still be dark, this was a way for a woman to suggest that she was open to being observed, that is, to romantic approaches. Now, no man of good character would be so crass as to go up and peer through a carriage window, of course, but if he happened to be riding by, or was in his own cart and the two were positioned nearby at a festival, for example, then he couldn't be blamed for sneaking a peek. If he liked what he saw, then he might send her a poem on the spot, as Ariwara no Narihira did on seeing a lady's face through the curtains of her carriage when she was observing an archery display by the imperial bodyguards. Mizu mo arazu, mi mo senu hito no koishiku wa ayanaku kyou ya nagame kurasan. Not unseen, yet not seen, lady, have I longed to no purpose today, lost in thoughts of you. On receipt of such a poem, a lady had to decide how to respond, and her usual answer was sceptical, that on such slight acquaintance the man couldn't possibly have developed passionate feelings. The lady to whom Narihira addressed his poem made just such a response. Shiru shiranu nanika ayanaku wakite wan, omoi no mi koso shirube narikere. To know or know not, why pointlessly say such a thing? Your feelings alone should show you the way. Essentially, she's saying, if your feelings had any real depth to them, you wouldn't be shilly-shallying about questioning how I'm going to respond. You'd act on them and then find out. So, man up and approach me directly, but stop wasting my time otherwise. You get the impression that she wouldn't be averse to Narihira calling on her, but she's got no patience for his tentative approach. Almost all of the major male poets in the early Heian period wrote poems like this, although in the majority of cases we don't know how the ladies they addressed responded. So Mibu no Tadamine was at a shrine festival and saw a lady there, and then sent this to her after he had found out where she lived. Kasuga no no yukima o wakete oide kuru, kusa no hatsuka ni mieshi kimi wa mo. In the fields of Kasuga, the fallen snow is parting, pushed aside by new young shoots, as briefly I caught sight of you. Kino Tsurayuki sent this poem to a lady after visiting a spot where women were wont to pick flowers and seeing her. Yamazakura, kasumi no ma yori honoka ni mo, miteshi hito koso koishikari kere. A mountain cherry, through the drifting mists, faintly seen thus there is a lady I long for all the more. We also have poems which demonstrate how men would address a woman in the very early stages of a relationship, when they were wanting to assure her of the seriousness of their intentions. For example, there is this poem by Taira no Tsuneyaki, which has the head note sent to a woman at the beginning. Shimogare no fuyu no ni tateru murasusuki, honome kasabaya omou kokoro o. In frost-burned winter meadows stand clusters of silver grass. If only they would briefly reveal the feelings in my heart. Silvergrass, Suzuki, can grow up to 6 feet, that is 2 meters, tall or more. So the image Tsuneaki is conveying is twofold, of the grass swaying in the wind and beckoning the woman, figuratively at least, closer to him, and of the fronds parting momentarily to allow a view through them. It wasn't just plants that men used to figuratively express their passions. Fujiwara no Sanekata, who lived in the latter half of the 10th century and enjoys a reputation for passion and ill fortune to this day. He was exiled from Heian Japan and died in a riding accident in the far north of Japan where he was buried. Sent this as his first message to a lady. Kakutoda ni eyawa buki no sashimo gusa, sashimo shirajina mo yuru omoi yo. Just how it is I cannot say, so of Mount Ibuki's plants aflame, do you know not a thing, nor of the passion burning in me. Mount Ibuki was an active volcano, so it was an ideal image of smouldering passion which might burst out uncontrollably, while the plant he refers to is moxa, which was used for moxibustion, where cones of the dry plant were, and still are in contemporary East Asian medicine, burnt on acupuncture points of the skin as a form of medical treatment. The moxa burns slowly, like an incense cone, and so is another figurative image of smouldering passion. Incidentally, if you want to read more of Sanekata's poetry, my translation of his complete collection, Sanekatashu, is available from Amazon. Now, I said earlier that we don't have nearly as many examples of women's responses to men's protestations of love as we do of the men's offerings. What we do have, though, is a remarkable poetry contest which was held on the 19th of June 1102, or the second day of the intercalary 5th month Kowa-2 in traditional Japanese dating. The contest, although that's a bit of a misnomer because there aren't any real judgments, is called Horikawa-in Enjo Awase, or former Emperor Horikawa's love letter match, and the introductory text to the event relates that it arose when some of the emperor's courtiers were in his presence and composing poems. Horikawa thought it would be entertaining if he had the men compose poems as if they were professing their love, and the court ladies present compose poems as if they were responding. The result is a set of artfully constructed poems typifying the back and forth between would-be and actual lovers in Heian Japan. I won't give all of them, just a couple of pairs, but if you want to read more, the whole match is available to read on wakapoetry.net, if you like. So, first of all, here's a poem by Middle Captain Toshitada. Shitoshirenu omoi ariso no hamakaze ni nami no yoru koso iwama hoshi kere. Unknown to all, my passion burns towards a rocky beach. The breeze brings waves. That I would tell you. Toshitada builds his poem around a pivot in the second line, on ariso, in that this is both part of omoi ari, I have feelings of love and passion, and ariso no hamakaze, the breeze blowing towards a rocky beach. He then has a second piece of wordplay at the end of the poem, which I decided not to work into the translation, in that there is nami ni yoru koso iwama, cracks in the rocks where the waves break, and iwama hoshi kere, I would tell you. The waves are, of course, his professions of love, while the rocky beach is the woman's resistance and hard-heartedness. The lady who replies is anonymous in the contest, but her poem was included in the exemplary Ogura Hyakunin Isshu collection, where it is attributed to Lady Ki. Oto ni kiku Takashi no hama no adanami wa kakeji yasode no nure mo koso sure. By repute, upon Takashi Beach break faithless waves, so had I not better keep away, lest my sleeves should end up soaked. Ki uses an utamakura, a poetic place name, Takashi Beach, in her poem. Takashi the place was homophonous with Takashi be high, and was used to suggest that the sounds she is hearing are noisy or loud. And what are they? Rumours of Toshitada's faithlessness as a lover. The word for these rumours is adanami, which contains nami, the word for wave, and so fits with the image of the beach, which she has mentioned before. A beach is by the sea, and a lady visiting one could certainly expect to get the long sleeves of her robes wet, but in this case the wetness would be the tears she would cry when he was unfaithful to her if she gave in to his professions of love. I've heard you're a... well, I won't use the word here, but it begins with F and ends with boy, she's saying, and I wouldn't touch you with a barge pole. So, as you can see, Heian ladies weren't shy about rejecting a man and telling him why. Here's another pair of poems from the contest. Major Councillor Kinzane starts with Omoyamari ikade morasan, okuyama no iwa kakikomuru tani no shita mizu. My passion's full, so how should it o'erflow? Deep within the mountains, hemmed in by crags, are the waters of the valley flow. I've loved you secretly for ages, he says, but now my feelings just can't be contained and I have to tell you of them. He builds this image of repressed passion, bursting out with his mention of a mountain torrent reaching the floor of a valley and being forced through a narrow channel. In reply, a lady who we know as the Suo handmaid, although some scholars have speculated that her name may have been Nakako, offers Ikanareba oto ni nomikuku yamakawa no asaki ni shimo wa kokoro yoshuran. For some reason, I simply hear the sound of a mountain stream. Into the shallows, indeed. Your heart has been swept, it seems. Again, this is quite a cutting response. You're just spouting empty words, she says, the sound of the mountain stream, and your feelings for me are as shallow as the places water coming off the mountains ends up. Well, that's it for today. In the next video, I'll talk about the impact gossip could have on a potential or actual relationship, and how men and women express their worries about it in poetry. As always, feel free to pop any questions in the comments, check out wakapoetry.net for more poems, and subscribe to the channel if you want to know more. See you next time.